Hi, welcome to the Relate Well Institute and another Relate Well moment. I'm Dr. Rick Marks, the founder of Relate Well, and it is our pleasure to be here with you, just sharing with you some insights and thoughts about life, love, spirituality, and all things relationships. And if you are single, dating, wanting to date, or married, the things we share apply to your life. It's not just about marriage. Our world is beyond just the marriage world. It's also about healthy relations. Because we want single people and youth to make good decisions about marriage. So when you marry the right person that's healthy and mature, and you're healthy and mature, you can create the love that you want and stay married till death do you part. You see, people are making really poor decisions about mate selection today. We want people to be healthy, mature in their relationships in all aspects. So we, in our Relate Well program process, we actually teach you the fundamental skills and principles, how to bond, how to communicate, how to solve problems, how to emotionally regulate yourself, how to become a healthy, mature, loving adult, so that all your relationships can love and thrive, can be loving and thriving. If you want to know more about that, or if you want to take our Relate Well process in the comfort of your own home, me teaching you, go to relatewell.us. That's relatewell.us, and there's information there. And click on the core program if you're interested for yourself, be it single, dating, or married. There is a leadership segment there for how we teach us in the workplace. We teach emotionally healthy leadership, as well as teachings for the faith-based organizations and for therapists to use the Relate Well process with couples and therapy. What I am going to talk about today is why is grace and truth so important in a life? And those are two essentials that must check each other. They keep each other in check, all right? Much like the three government balances of the three offices of government, the executive branch, the legislative, and judicial, they keep each other in check, all right, or supposed to ideally. Grace and truth do as well. So we're going to talk about that, okay? And so I'm reminded of a story, and this person came from outer space to visit, and this planet that he was on sent him to Earth to understand Earthlings. And he went there and came and landed his spacecraft outside of what he did not know was a church. Went in there and started watching and listening to the people. And when he noticed that the people were harsh, they acted loving, but behind the scenes they were unloving. They were uncaring. There was a threat of anger and fear. There were insecurities he noticed. He noticed how when something happened, they tended to tell people to get over it in many different forms and ways. And he thought, wow, these people they're uncaring. I mean, they know their truths. I mean, he watched them in their Sunday school classes. They knew their text. They knew the books they were reading. They understood it all. And you could tell they valued the things they learned. They valued the truths they learned. But as he watched them over time, he also noticed, though they knew what they were teaching and understood it, somehow they were kind of cold and distant and disconnected. And he thought, nah, I don't want this. So he goes on and finds another church, which he did not know was a church, and goes in there, and man, these people were warm and inviting. They were caring and they were loving. They were so accepting of each other. And if someone was hurting, he'd notice two or three rattle around, and they would pray, and they would put their arms around that person. They would cry with them. And others that were excited about them, they would laugh with them. And he felt in the place this deep connection, this deep care and deep concern. But as he hung around and watched them over time, he noticed that there's a pain and a hurt in their eyes as well. That there's something else going on that they never really verbalized, because he noticed as he watched them, they kind of lost their way. They had no sense of direction. They knew how to love well, by the way. They knew how to accept and love each other. They knew relationships really well, but somehow they lost their way. It's like they were just existing, but they didn't know where they were going, or they didn't have a purpose or a mission. And they allowed a lot of things to happen that probably shouldn't be. And he went back to his planet. They're all excited for a report there, right? He came back and met with the council of the planet and said, well, there's two types of people down there. I noticed they worship this thing they call God, and there was one group, they knew their religious text. They understood it really, really well. Matter of fact, they could quote it. But I also noticed, as I watched them, they are harsh, they are mean, they're insensitive, they're neglectful, negligent. He said they really came across as uncaring. But they knew what they wanted to do. They had purpose. I mean, they had all kinds of plans. And he said, the longer I stayed there, I just didn't feel valued or wanted. So I found this other group. And he goes, I'm going to tell you, this other group, I felt valued. I felt wanted. Everybody in there is loving. I mean, they are masters at loving people. They know how to connect and how to bond. They were crying with each other. They were laughing with each other. But the longer I watched them, they didn't seem to have a plan, a purpose. They didn't know where they were going. They didn't have any, I mean, like over here they would allow some things and over here they didn't allow things. And I wasn't really sure what all that was about. It's almost like they didn't have some sense of a structure by which to live their life. And one of the planet elders said, neither of them seem really plausible for a successful life, do they? And this journeyman said, no. And the council said, I wonder what would happen if they integrated those together. That's grace and truth. Grace and truth were divided at the fall. So throughout the Old Testament, you see God giving grace, but the Old Testament's about law. That's truth. Because grace and truth were divided. In John chapter 1, we see that in the person of Jesus, he was full of grace and truth. Not grace and truth on a continuum. He was 100% grace and 100% truth. He was both integrated as a whole. And that's what we're supposed to be. Grace and truth, integrated as a whole. What is grace? Grace is the relational aspect of God's character. It's who he is relationally. It's his heart. It shows up in his love. It shows up in his acceptance. It shows up in his comfort. It shows up in his encouragement. It shows up in his loving discipline. It shows up in many different ways. It shows up in speaking the truth with love. There it is, grace and truth together. It shows up when we mourn with those that mourn and rejoice with those that rejoice. Romans 12:15. It shows up when we forgive. It shows up when we have godly sorrow, which leads to our repentance for things we've done that hurt others. Grace is the relational aspect of God's heart, and we need to be people of grace. The world is looking for it. Unconditional love. In other words, it's like no matter how bad I am I still okay? Am I still lovable? And grace says, oh yes you are. Oh yes you are. But then there's truth. Truth is the structural aspect of God's character. Grace is relational. Truth is structure. In other words, a body without a skeleton would just fall apart, wouldn't it? I mean, you got to have a skeleton in order to hold all this up, right? And so truth is the skeleton that all of life hangs on. Truth gives shape to the universe. Truth gives shape to your relationship. Truth gives shape to your heart. Truth gives shape to your heart. It directs the grace in healthy, mature ways. Grace without truth can give love in immature ways. Truth without grace gives advice and logic and reasons without love. You can see, because truth without grace actually becomes judgment. Truth without grace becomes judgment, and people feel it. But people who are focused on truth without grace, we call that legalism, fundamentalism. There's different names for what people use. But they've disconnected from their heart, thus they're not connected to your heart. Because truth without grace disconnects us from our own heart. And if I'm disconnected from my own heart, I can't connect to your heart. But grace without truth becomes license. It becomes permissiveness. I'm going to do whatever I want so I can feel good and feel loved. But what you don't realize is people accept what you do because you keep getting grace. You keep hurting yourself along the way because no one's offering truth that gives you the path for healthy, mature ways of living. And that becomes a sensible license. And when grace and truth are disconnected, it leads to us living with a mask. We hide ourselves. So you have your public self, and then you have your real self. Or I'd say you have the false self, which is your mask that you wear publicly. And then there's the real you. There's the real you. And your kids and your parents and your family, those who know you best, know the real you. When I served on a mega church many years ago, I always told my wife and kids when they were growing up, if the way you see me treat people in public is not the same way I treat you and your mama in particular, is not the same way I treat y'all at home, don't trust my faith. I'm a liar and a hypocrite, because the real me is not the one in public at church. The real me is the guy at home. And if there's a disconnect between those two, and my kids walk away from the faith, I should not complain. Why? They didn't see it either. Why? Because we live in a false sense of self. Churches that are legalistic are live in the division between grace and truth. They value truth without grace. And then any wonder why so many church attending youth, by the time they reach high school, emotionally and spiritually have already left the church and they're gone? They didn't see any grace. They didn't see, they got all the truth, but they saw no love and mercy. They saw very little compassion. What they saw was judgment. And so that creates a way for me to live in a hidden self. Listen to this. Grace and truth together reverses the effects of the fall, which were separation from God and others. Grace and truth together invite us out of isolation, out of loneliness, and into relationship. Grace, when it is combined with truth, invites your true self, the one behind the mask, the one that is behind the wall that you built to protect yourself. It invites that true self, the you who you really are, with your mask off, the one that you're afraid to look at because there's so much shame, the one you are with all your warts, all your secrets. It invites that person into loving relationship. It is one thing to have safety in a relationship, which we all do need, by the way. It is quite another to be truly known and fully accepted in the relationship. It is one thing to feel safe in a relationship, but it's much more profound to be in a relationship where you're truly known. No masks, no hidden agendas, no hidden parts of you. And in that nakedness, that emotional openness, that vulnerability, what you find is grace. 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 And you begin to realize it's okay to not be okay. You see, most people today are not okay with not being okay. And because they're not okay with not being okay, they do all kinds of crazy ways of living in order to feel okay. And I came to realization a long time ago. When I allow myself to get to a point that it's not okay, when I allow myself to get to a point that it's okay to not be okay, then I'm okay. Okay, now I can live and I can be free to be who God wants me to be without my hidden self. And that is the best way to live in peace. You are unconditionally loved already. Jesus is grace and truth. the body of Christ is supposed to be built as well. May it be that we position our hearts to do that so that we can love others the same way. It's Dr. Rick. If we can serve you, let us know. Learn more about us and our work at drrickmarks.com, drrickmarks.com. And if you want to learn more about our Relate Well curriculums, go to relatewell.us. That's relatewell.us. Have a blessed day.